Welcome to Justice Talks. This is the podcast where we use trauma informed care practices to engage with criminal justice reform. My name is Dr. Lori Hall, and today I'm joined by two guests. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Lucy Lewis.
And I'm Madeline Cox.
So, today we're talking about the topic of freedom and what is freedom. So, freedom is defined as this power that we have to exist without hindrance, right? And so, a lot of people think about freedom as a concept that relates to like physicality, right? Our ability to move about and do things and all of those things. But I want to kind of dissect some really important topics related or concepts related to freedom. So when we're talking about freedom, we're talking about not just external freedom, which is our ability to move about, to not be hindered in the way that we exist, but also about internal freedom, right? And so when we're talking about trauma informed care and trauma informed frameworks, we're really engaging with a concept more relating to internal freedom, right? So, have you ever thought about the freedom that you have as individuals, not just externally, but in an internal way, and how that can be kind of manipulated by your experiences?
For sure. For
Mm-hmm.
sure. I feel like I was raised being more open to the idea of therapy. And I feel like therapy is related to the idea of intrinsic freedom because it allows you to have a better grasp of yourself and understand how yourself and your mind work outside of just regular daily life. Whereas other people might not have those same views of
Yeah,
attaining like that what's it called, that intrinsic freedom.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I growing up, my mother always tried to tell me what freedom is a feeling. It's not just like going out somewhere,
Mm,
it's a feeling. And it took me honestly a while for me to truly understand that
mm.
freedom is just that it's the feeling of freedom is what I think true freedom is. Just like being able to go out and do things that you never thought you could do, and it's just, like, really nice. Like, when I got to go to the Grand Prix, I've never felt so free. It's just, like, something that I thought was truly amazing, and just you had that feeling of anything was possible.
I think it's interesting that you kind of phrase it as a feeling because I think for me, that's exactly how I view it. But that's more of like an internal or an intrinsic view of what freedom is rather than the external. A lot of people talk about freedom as an external thing, like the absence of constraint, right? That
Mm.
I'm able to go to the Grand Prix or that I'm able to go here or do that, right? And I think when we think about individuals who's experienced trauma, really what's taken from them is their internal freedom, their ability to feel free, right?
Mhm.
To be unconstrained by the limitations of those experiences. And on a personal level, for me, when I think about things that I've experienced throughout my life that have been kind of traumatic, right? There's always, and I resonate with this idea of being a prisoner in my own mind. Um, and this idea that um, other people still have control over me just from those traumatic experiences, and that I'm constantly searching for this internal freedom or this ability to exist without their input. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I know exactly what you're talking about because there's, like, still things, like, to this day of, like, I can't physically go and do something because just, like, something in the past that happened to me is, like, it's physically and mentally just stopping me from being able to do that thing, like, I have to work around it, like, I can't just
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think I understand. I think I misunderstood when you were talking about uh what's it called, like physical freedom versus like mental freedom,
Yeah.
because I see what you mean. There's a sort of like a an overlap of the mental side of freedom and the physical side of freedom. Like you can be physically able to go to the Grand Prix, but if your brain is like, no, I am not allowed to enjoy this until I
Mhm.
get this, such and things done. That would that be an example of mental Goodness, the opposite of freedom?
Internal, yeah, like,
Yeah,
the internal constraint, and I think of,
constraint.
like, internal freedom and the constraints that limit our ability to have freedom is more about this idea of liberation from not necessarily desire, but liberation from the constraints that confine us in our desires, right? So you might desire to go to the Grand Prix, but maybe experiences in your life have, created something in you that constrains your ability to go there. So your desire is constrained,
Mhm.
right? And we're constrained internally in a lot of other ways that are impacted by the experiences that we've had with other people, right? We may have a desire for love, right? And connectedness for people, and we really desire that, but because of prior experience, we don't allow ourselves to get close to people. We don't allow ourselves to engage in like intimate relationships. We don't allow physical touch, even though we deeply desire those things, right? We experience a loss of freedom, an internal freedom that we no longer have because of these experiences that we've had early in life or throughout our life. And I don't think it's something that we actually engage with this idea very often. I think that when we talk about freedom, we're talking about it in a very, very perfunctory, externalized way. Am I able to move about? Is there anything hindering me or constraining me from doing so? But people, we don't really engage in what is at stake on an internal freedom aspect when we think about traumatic experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I've growing up, like, I've always it's in my mind, if I can't go somewhere, it's because I physically can't go somewhere, and I think that's just part of growing up is realizing the difference between external and internal, just because, like, because I could go. Like, last year, I could have gone to the Grand Prix. We're using this example. I'm a nerd about this. Um, but, like, last year, I could have gone to it, but there was something inside me that said, like, "No, I have to do this instead. I can't go do this." But externally, I could have walked right down it. I live on campus. I heard it for those 3 days. I could have physically gone and done it. There were no external constraints. It was more of an internal thing, and I don't think people really think of it as freedom. They just think like, "Oh, no, I just can't do it because of this." But, like, it's internal constraint of freedom is exactly what it is. I never
Mhm.
thought to put those words to it.
You're
Yeah.
so right. I feel like in American culture, there is such an emphasis on the physicality of freedom and
Mhm.
the right to be wherever you can be, the right to say whatever you want to say. Uh, it's talked a lot about how it's sort of like enshrined in our Constitution and just in American culture. The There's also the American dream, the freedom to attain whatever you have like the ability to attain, the skills, the
Mhm.
drive to attain. And that's all very physical freedom. And in American culture, you're right, there is definitely a lack of discussion and therefore a lack of awareness in American culture of internalized freedom.
I really agree with that awareness. It's just nobody really realizes, I feel like,
You don't
that
know what you don't know.
yeah, it's a mental block.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that another term that people kind of convolute with freedom is liberty. And I think a lot of time when we're talking about freedom, we're really talking about liberty. So when we talk about freedom, we're really talking about the power that we have to exist without hindrance, without constraint, right? So if you think about that, that is more of like an intrinsic concept, right? It's less about the external. Liberty has more to do with external control because liberty is the absence of external control, whereas freedom is the power to be without hindrance. And those things are different,
Mhm.
right? So we're able to just with freedom, right? We're able to just exist as we are, right? There's no one no outside forces that are telling us you have to be or do this certain way. And if you think about in American culture, the freedom to exist really doesn't exist, right?
You're
Yeah.
right.
The freedom to exist, the power to exist just doesn't exist. But if you think about liberty, that is something that is actually talked more about in our Constitution, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, because that is what really a lot of people, especially in America, are talking about when they say the word freedom. They're talking about liberty, which is the absence of external control. So it's not about your ability to exist as a human, right? In all of your uniqueness, however you choose to. Liberty is about being able to move, go about, do, be, whatever without people preventing that, government specifically,
Mhm.
right? So I think that when we are talking about freedom, we get confused about this presence of the, physicality of it,
Mhm.
when really the physicality is more about liberty and liberation. But I think that also when we're talking about internal freedom, we get that confused with liberty.
I think you're right. Thank you for clarifying the difference between liberty and freedom, because you're definitely right. I said before, like, oh, freedom's discussed in the Constitution, but no, you're right. It's liberty and not freedom
Mhm.
discussed. And that is something conflated in American culture, as you said before. Sorry, you were going
No,
to
no,
say something?
I was just agreeing. I never thought of it like that.
Hmm.
Like that makes so much more sense ab- about all of that, especially with like freedom. And you keep using the word like internal power. And I
Mhm.
think power is just like it goes so well with the word freedom because it's the power in yourself
Mhm.
of what you think freedom is and what all like what you do.
So that's the power is relating to autonomy. So
Yeah.
autonomy is our ability to self-govern, right? To
Hmm.
make choices for ourselves and how we exist, how we go about. And so when we're talking about like these things, these concepts, freedom, liberty, autonomy, while there's overlap, right? We tend to use them in synonymous ways,
Mm.
but these are very distinct things, right? So freedom is about having the power to exist without hindrance, right? Liberty is the absence of external control, but autonomy is the ability to self govern, right? To choose for ourselves what we do, how we do it. Can I go to the Prix? Well, absolutely. Yes, I can go. And in fact, I am going, right?
Hmm.
It's engaging with all three of those concepts,
Mhm.
right? Just that one decision is engaging with, do you have the freedom, the liberty, and the autonomy to be able to do whatever it is you're trying to do? Go to the Grand Prix, right?
Mhm.
And any one of those forces could limit or constrain us in some capacity. But in the context of individuals who've experienced trauma, those things are stripped from them, right? They're taken away. And so often when we think about justice reform, we think about punishment for the offender is a way to restore the safety and security to the victim. But really, what's lost by the victim is their own liberty, freedom, and autonomy. How do you reconcile that? Right? Because no amount of punishment can give that back to an individual.
Yeah.
And
You're
that's a
right.
difficult thing that we don't even entertain within our justice system. We think, well, we punished this individual, right? We gave them a fine, we sent them to jail or prison. There, you're whole again.
You've gotten your retribution.
That's your retribution,
You've
right?
gotten, the offender has gotten what has been coming for
They've got
them.
their just desserts, right?
Hmm. And therefore, you're fine now. The thing that
It's all better,
the action that wronged you is now reversed.
right?
No, that
But
does so much.
it
Yeah.
takes so much work, right,
Mhm.
though, to really focus on internal freedom, just to allow yourself to make decisions
Mhm.
about what you do and how you exist, right? Using the liberty that you have.
Now, this discussion is really reminding me of sociology,
Mm.
and there are a lot of sociological theories discussing on how people make decisions and what sort of hinders their ability to make decisions based on like how they learn like ethics, how they learn like morality and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And I feel like sociology is very macro in the sense of looking at like societies and like groups of individuals rather than individuals' experiences, which
Mm.
really, really enjoy about criminology.
Mm.
And specifically with our discussion and what we learned about trauma influencing individuals and victims, because I can see how those sociological theories both apply and also don't go into nearly enough detail. There is a lack they, there is a lack of autonomy there that goes beyond anything I've learned in sociological theories.
Yeah. I don't think that we engage enough in those conversations about what victims actually lose, right? When we're talking about being victimized or experiencing trauma, we talk about more tangible things. Oh, well, their items were stolen or this was damaged or whatever it may be. And we look at rectifying those because we have a difficult time remedying with the intangible, right? But
Mm-hmm.
generally, if you think about you as an individual, your pursuit in life is driven by your own liberty, right? You're trying to preserve your own liberty, and that is your ability to exist without external constraint, right? Without external control. If you go back to childhood, right, and you think about your interactions with your parents, most of the time you were acting in ways that was, you know, to advance your own will, so to speak, right? It was in the pursuit of your own liberty. And then the external control, your parent came in and provided some punishment to restrict or constrain your own liberty. And there was always this kind of battle between the authority, right? And your pursuit of your own liberty. And if you think about throughout life, your number one goal is pursuing your own will, which is the liberty to exist, how you choose to do what you choose to do, to go where you choose to go, to be who you choose to be, engaging with your freedom, engaging with your own autonomy. But all of it is driven by your pursuit of liberty. And only when some external force comes in to constrain that, do problems arise. If you really reflect back on it, if you think about teachers say, do this or don't do that, that's constricting your liberty. Well, I chose to do this. Well, you say it's wrong. Well, that's because you say it's wrong, right? But there's a punishment applied. A grade is lowered, right? Or a boss says, no, you can't do that or say that or be that, right? They're constraining your own liberty, your ability to exist. And so there's always this push and pull throughout your life where external factors are coming in, external controls are coming in to restrict your own liberty. And you're pushing back and saying, no, this is my will, this is my liberty that I'm engaging with throughout life. Really, we're all out there pursuing our own liberation.
Mm-hmm. And trauma can really now I'm understanding. My brain is like putting those pieces together and like working on this new mental framework that truly I'm like constructing during this
Yeah.
podcast. But my brain immediately thinks about mental health issues, not
Mhm.
just trauma, and how mental health issues can also take away that liberty in intangible ways that
Well,
are difficult to see.
I think of it more along the lines of this is the distress that results from a restriction of your liberty.
I can see how that can be the case that there in certain mental illnesses. The one that comes to mind to me is ADHD because I have a lot of friends and family who have ADHD, and when they have discussed with me their struggles with executive dysfunction, it's incredibly difficult to explain what executive dysfunction is. because it's often labeled as you being lazy. Like, oh, you don't want to take out the trash. You're just being lazy. When in reality, they want to take out the trash so bad, but there is an internal blockage that is causing them sometimes like physical or mental pain to try and work through that to then take out the trash.
So there's a
So,
lot of research that backs the connection between ADHD and early childhood trauma.
oh,
They're actually
Really?
learning that ADHD is a manifestation of these early adverse childhood experiences that have greatly impaired the cognitive functioning and developmental phases of young children that has resulted in executive dysfunction. And so, if I'm relating it back to this idea of liberty, if you think about young children and their will, their desire, their liberty is challenged and constrained in such a way that it becomes traumatic and it interferes with their ability to develop in pro social, normal childhood developmental ways, that results in the manifestation of ADHD as well as ODD that leads to conduct disorders, which then manifests later on as psychological disorders or personality disorders. And so there's a connection still to trauma and liberty when we think about mental health across the spectrum. I really do still strongly see a lot of support for the connection between loss of liberty and mental distress.
hmm,
Wow, I never knew that. I never thought of it like that. Okay, I love
yeah.
learning new things about
Hmm.
this. I do like in my head we keep saying internal and then like intangible. I keep thinking of like the same thing. Like like we focus on the things that we can touch, things we can see, but the intangible things is our internal self. Like
Mhm.
so all of
Yeah.
these people who are going through these traumatic events, we can't touch the intangible thing because that's their internal feelings.
Mhm.
And so when we keep saying these two words, and I'm like, I feel like they're the same thing in the context that we're talking about, basically, for the most part, at least.
Yeah, I think I would agree that they can be utilized or used interchangeably, but I still think that there is some distinction between them, but I do think that there is some symmetry for both of them. Yeah, so internally we're just talking about the inside of ourselves,
Mhm.
Hmm.
which is also intangible,
Yeah.
right? But there's also a tangibility to the internal in some regards, like the physical anatomy that we have,
Yeah.
right?
The
Um,
chemicals in the brain,
yeah,
the brain structures,
for
the
sure.
mhm, stuff like that. And I feel like there's a difference between internal and intangible, because there is a certain divide between yourself and your internal like identity and your thoughts, and you can battle against your the other like intangible aspects which are not necessarily baked into yourself. They
Right.
can be things
Mhm.
that you've learned from like or like morals or values and lessons taught to you by like different like social institutions like your family, school, religion, the
Mhm.
government and stuff like that, which are not
Yeah.
necessarily a part of the self, but are intangible still.
Right. Yeah.
So that's my sociologist self talking.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank y'all for coming and talking to me today. I really enjoyed our discussion on what freedom is and the differences between freedom and liberty.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
this
you.
is really good.
So, you're watching Justice Talks. This is the podcast where we talk about trauma informed care practices and how we can utilize that to inform criminal justice reform.